Hey guys, welcome to the channel. In this episode we're going to be finishing up everything we're supposed to be doing on this NC Mx5 race car, so stay tuned. Alright, so the parts have been painted, they've dried overnight, and they're ready to come out of the booth. But before we put the car in the booth, we've got some things we've got to sand on it. Just basically the roll bars. Now we're going to take some 180 on a DA and hit what we can on the bars. It's kind of hard to sand with a DA on a bar, but it's a little bit faster over the majority of the areas. Once we've done that, we're going to go back over it by hand with 180, sand everything we can by hand, and then we'll go over all the bars with a red pad. Now once we get that sanded, we can get it in the booth, get it taped up, and get it ready to start painting the interior of this car. Alright, so it looks like this thing is all taped up and ready to go. Except for this. I need to put a piece of tape over this VIN because I don't want to put paint on the VIN. But other than that, looks like we're ready to go. The first thing we're going to be spraying on this car is going to be an epoxy. And we're going to be doing it wet on wet. That means I'm going to spray it on, give it a flash time, and then I'll start spraying the single stage over that. And the reason why I'm going to use the epoxy is because all the bare metal. Now, the cage is bare metal. There's large panels in here that are bare metal. So the epoxy has really good adhesion properties to bare metal, so we're going to be using that. See, one other thing I need to do. I need to put some seam sealer on this little seam here for the patch panel we put in for the rust repair. Make that look a little bit better. But once I can do those two things, we should be ready to start spraying. So let's get those things taken care of, and then we can start putting some paint on this thing. So when I was seam sealing inside the trunk there, I used some tape to outline the area that I was seam sealing. And the reason why I do that is because it'll leave a crisper, cleaner edge around the seam sealer. And I spread it with this little tool here. You can buy these at any hardware store. I think I got this at Home Depot. It's just a little rubber spreader, and it's intended for wiping the caulking around a tub or in the bathroom somewhere at your home. So you can use this. You can also just use your finger. Make sure you use a glove because it's hard to get off your finger. So spread it around with your finger, works fine. If you want to duplicate brush marks, just use a little acid brush or any type of disposable brush will work fine. But in this case, we use this and it makes a smooth edge and a clean outside edge to make it look really nice and clean. So let's get our paint suit on, get our epoxy mixed up, and let's start spraying. once we sprayed the epoxy on there, we gave it about a 15 or 20 minute flash time, and something occurred to me just now that maybe you guys may not know what flash time is. I say it a lot of my videos. I don't know if I've ever explained what it is, so let me try to explain it in some layman terms. The solvent is what makes paint liquid, right? So there is solvent in paint because it's a liquid, and when you add reducer, you're thinning it down, which puts more solvent in it. So in essence, when I say flash off, I'm talking about the solvents flashing out of the paint. So it's becoming a solid instead of a liquid. So when you spray it on there, in order for it to spray out of the gun, it needs to be a liquid. So it sprays on there, and it's still wet, and it's still got the sheen to it, and it's the solvents are still in it. So the solvents are going to evaporate, if you will. They'll flash out of the paint, which makes it a solid. And at that point, it's ready to put the next coat on. Now, if you apply a coat over a non-flashed off paint, there's a few things that can go wrong. It's a liquid, so if you more liquid on top of it, it's a good possibility that it will run. It also can be too thick with solvent, and it'll dry over, the skim over the top will dry, and the underneath layers will still be wet, and it'll call what they say it'll trap solvents. And when you trap solvents, two things can happen. Can delaminate, which means the layers will come apart, or it'll solvent pop. So the top layer will dry, and then the solvent's got to come out. So it actually bores a little hole, makes little air bubbles, which makes little holes and causes solvent pop. So it's pretty important to get all of the solvent out before you start putting on the next coat. So flash time is very important. So we give it ample time to flash off, and the flash times range depending on how cool the temperatures are outside or how hot the temperatures are, and also the reducers that you use. If you're using a slower reducer, it takes longer to flash out than it does if you're using a faster reducer. So we gave this ample time to flash off, so we're going to go spray on some single stage. We're going to put it on 2 coats of this single stage with a 15-minute flash time in between each coat. Alright, so I got the last coat of single stage sprayed on that interior. Whew, let's go have a look at it. Alright, so what'd you guys think? Yeah, I thought it looked pretty good too. I'm going to get this paint suit off, get ready to go home. We'll let this car dry overnight, and we'll come back in the morning. We can go ahead and hang all the parts that we've already painted back on the car, get it ready to take back to OPM so they can make this thing a race car. Alright, so let's check this thing. I'm pushing on to make sure that the paint's dry. See if it's fingerprinting. And it's not, so it's pretty dry. So we can start putting this thing together. We'll get this car untaped and get these parts untaped and start hanging all these parts back on the car. What we like to do is set up a little table and put all these nuts and bolts, kind of get them separated, put all the small parts on the table. We'll get everything out of that box, just kind of get it spread out so we can see what we've got to get put on the car. It makes it a little bit easier when we're doing the assembly. So these shocks go on a certain way on these hinges, and if you're ever doing something, you take it apart, you've got a cell phone with you, take a picture of it. And you can reference that picture to see which way those shocks need to go or whatever it is you're taking off. I also found these little rubber cones here, and they work really well for plugging the threaded holes so we don't get paint in the threads. Alright, so we've got this thing all put back together. Let's get this thing loaded up on the trailer so we can get it back over to OPM.
Don't be mad at lazy people. They didn't do anything.
Alright, so that's going to be about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, hit that like button and share it with your friends. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and clicking on the bell icon. That way you won't miss any future content. If you have any thoughts or questions, leave it in the comment section down below. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. See ya!